Scotland. All of a sudden, David learns the trade. He becomes the gang leader. So what they're saying now in building their strategy to get government on board is, how do we fix David's kids? How do we look at, we can do this different? And then when you look at that number 14 in the corner there, that's the number of interventions they could have did before this young fellow was 13. Well, he was still a teen. I guess it was 14 or 15, but he was a teenager. How many were done? 0. Why? Because the police had part of the information, social services had part of the information, health had part of the information, education had part of the information, and nobody was sharing the information. And as a result, this kid's path just continued to go where it's going. So what they said is, that's not good enough. You know, that's not good enough. We need to change this. If we can predict this, we can change this. If what I use the language, if it's predictable, it's preventable. So that was pretty powerful. We all sat around the room and we're looking at each other and we're thinking, wow, that's a pretty compelling story. That's something that makes you think, wow, maybe we can improve it. So we got home and we thought we'd build our own. And we call him Joe. And we changed Joe's name. And every piece of information that's taken out of here is from the records of those agencies. I'm going to start by giving you the information of social services, health, and education. So basically born in '86, dates are changed. Keep in mind, alcohol, domestic violence moves to foster care. Parents have drinking, domestic problems, different locations. Mom hospitalized, car accident, alcohol involved, kids moved with grandma. Parents went through alcohol treatment, kids moved back with them. Brother being violent and suicidal in school, and then wham. Mom stabs father to death. Joe witnesses this. Now here's the interesting part to this. These are the notes from education, right out of their files. Obviously, we could poke fun at everybody and blame, because education could do things different, health can do it, the police can do different. But the whole reason for exposing ourselves is, how can we do it better? These are the notes. Described before this happened, happy and energetic in class. After this happens, having trouble remaining on task in class. Seems very sad, hardly doing anything. Year after, extremely angry and aggressive behavior. You know what the interesting part of that is? A teacher was trying to fix this kid and had no idea what happened to him. How would you fix him? You know, put him in a special class, do this, he's got a behavioral issue, how do we get to that? Nobody in the education system knew this happened. Why would they? There's no authority or law that we should tell the people what happened in their home or in their schools. So it goes on. Mom placed children out, mom goes to jail. Joe referred to counseling and mental health, never given follow-up by caregivers. Why? Grandma canceled the appointment 3 times. What did health think? Grandma's got this under control. Grandma just obviously didn't have the resources and the means to get the young fella to the counseling, or for whatever reason was scared of it. Anyways, this kid never did get any mental health counseling. Kids moved back to grandma because of money. Now they're fighting. Nobody wants to pay for them. Mom out of jail, lived the YWCA with kids. Mom was drinking, breached parole, kids back with grandma. Joe's brother sexually assaulted his sister, all moved to foster care. Mom released on parole, completed alcohol treatment, kids moved back with her. Mom drinking, breached parole, kids placed in foster care. Trial for sexual assault, unfortunately refused to testify, charges stayed. Mom released from jail. Mom back to jail due to drinking. Kids placed with grandma. Mom released on parole, marries a murderer in prison. Kids moved back with mom. Joe misses school, anger management problem, no kidding. Problems with the law, YO involved. Violence between mom and sister Joe, social service. Now the kid's old enough, the police are becoming involved. Now the kid's old enough, so put that in perspective. He's just reaching that young age of 12. Mom's new husband released from jail, halfway house, ongoing violence between them, no food in home any occasion, kids not attending school on a regular basis. Joe in jail, kids placed with family, mom lost parental rights. That's the information from health, social services, and education. In police, we often lead in the intelligence component, and all the police in this room would basically be able to reconfirm that, is we spend a lot of money on technology, and there's a reason, because we want to become intelligence-led. So let's add our piece to this and watch this picture even get a little clearer. So this young fella comes into our radar screen, and this is all stuff that we figure out after the fact. Mom was involved in possession of stolen goods. The kid was doing the break and enters to basically mom be in the fence to support her drug habit. Then he was charged operation of dangerous motor vehicle. Then he's a suspect in an MVA and charged to break and enter. Then he was charged dangerous operation of a motor vehicle. Then he was a victim of a robbery, obviously living the lifestyle. charged YCJA, mom attempts suicide, again spiraling. Charged robbery of the firearms, the young fella. Then his family is evicted from housing due to gang and drug use. Charged shoplifting and bail violations. Charged willful damage. Charged escape custody. Charged YCJA ×2. Charged fail. How's the system working? Somebody made the point on the system. Really, you know what? We have no control of the system, and we can't fault the system, and the system is what it is. But what we can learn to do is play better or be more effective before the system. And I'll talk about that in a bit. Then this young fellow was charged escape custody ×2, assault peace officer, and obstruct public peace, and then wham. That's the murder, the knife taken out of our exhibit locker that he used to take another kid's life. Real, true story. Think about that pattern. Think of all the times that we could have shared information with each other and maybe diverted, changed, or perhaps prolonged or delayed this. I think any reasonable person putting their mind together and say, if we got this as a collective team, we could have probably had a better outcome. We might not have kept this young fellow out of jail. He might have other issues. But there's obviously some key indicators here that we could have been better than we were. So let's go further. Back to where we spent a lot of money on our system. That greenhouse or that area is a 2-block radius in our city. That greenhouse is where this young fella grew up. Those red dots are somebody living in all those houses in the neighborhood that have a criminal code conviction. And it's multiple criminal code conviction because unfortunately, when we went single, it was just a red blur on the screen. And that's sad. So if we would have known that, back to predictable and preventable, and if we would have come in on the early stages and we knew all this information that we had from the other agencies, could we have made a difference in that neighborhood? Without question. Absolutely no doubt. So, what we're talking about is problem solving. Let's just put this in a perspective in my area, what this means. We're a small community, 40,000 people. Last year, we had 988 missing persons. 988 missing persons. A large part of these people aren't missing persons. They're just chronic runaways. They're labeled as a missing person. The police carry the file because that's what the police do. Back to leadership ownership. We take control of the file. Nobody wants to have the file where somebody's going to found where that kid actually was in a world of hurt or trouble. But 60% of those come from group homes. Group homes. Group homes are funded by the federal government, the provincial government, partially the municipal government, or First Nations government in my community. You know what? There's absolutely no consistency of standards of what constitutes being an effective group home. So that particular one on the far right there had 9 missing persons in one weekend. 3 kids ran 3 times. They ran Friday night, they ran Saturday night, they ran Sunday night. What was the solution? Phone police. What did they find out? Well, he came back several hours more or in the next morning. 3 times. Nobody dealt with why the kids are running. Nobody dealt with how we could avoid the running. System was solved. So we went into this and we sat down with social services and education and health and said, how can we change this? This is not good. That group home on the end has had 13 over a course of several years. They have signed contracts. They don't have all the best kids. They have programming. They study their data to know when the best night kids are run. If a powwow's in town, here's the thing, we have to have activities. They basically use intelligence to become a better group home. So when we sat down and we tried to put standards in this, and now the province is looking at this, trying to put standards in this, we've reduced this by 70% already in the first year. And it'll go lower because at the end of the day, it just doesn't make sense. First of all, they're not missing persons. They're chronic runaways, chronic walkaways. So we're doing a risk assessment up front with the other agencies, putting the responsibility of parenting back to social services, and put some in checks and balances in their system. Just so you know, to put this in perspective, let's talk about the whole tax dollar. Let's not just talk about the 20 cents it costs policing. Let's talk about add the 55 cents it costs health, add another 20 cents for social services, and let's have the real discussion about community safety. In Saskatchewan, those group homes, troubled youth, not criminal, but troubled youth, we pay out $11,500 a month per kid to be in those group homes. We pay roughly $650 to $700 for a good foster parent. So when we're looking at the system and we start to talk change, with Dr. Waller, we know what works. Let's look at the gamut, let's look at the system, and I'll get into some of the things that we're doing here in a second. But going back to the anomaly, I told you 32 to 42% of our arrests come from outside of our city. True story. So 1/3 of our business is from outside of our city. So if we're going to develop a strategy that's just going to focus on Prince Edward Police Service, or Matt just focusing on Waterloo, or any of our other colleagues just focusing on their own area that isn't transportable or deliverable in other communities that are going to come in and feed the system, are we going to maximize our returns? Well, I had a little bit of trouble convincing the board, but actually when you put up this slide and showed them that we better get there, and we put up this slide and says, that's our crime severity index, the big four are on the bottom. We're obviously almost double in relation to those. All but 3 of those above us are our feeder system. That's northern Saskatchewan. So they're coming, and go back to the point where I told you that in 8 to 10 years, 50% are going to be under 15, and you use the same formula to say the same number you're going to input, is the number going to grow? Well, I can predict this better than my RSPs right now with the world economy. So back to, if it's predictable, it's preventable. And if we know what's coming, we better get part of the solution with northern Saskatchewan, or part of the policing and all the other agencies. So when we look at a solution, we better build a solution that can look at the other 1/3 of our business and help them out, because if we help them out, they help us out. So what do? Back to Scotland. Scotland says you can't keep up, you just can't throw money at it. You needed to focus. And the focus is the key, and we need common goals to obviously drive that in. And when they had common goals in GCAS in Scotland, in other words, all the agencies had similar common goals, they started to drive this thing down exponentially. I asked you that question, and Dr. Waller speaks about this as well. Who's responsible for community safety? I would say 90 to 95% of the general public would say the police. I think that's a common response. But if I take this report, as Dr. Waller referred to it, and says that the #1 world health problem is violence, is there a role for health? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying health is responsible for community safety, but the reality is we all are. I was on the health board in Saskatchewan. I'm familiar with health in Canada. This is not on the radar screen to the extent it needs to be in health. And certainly, I'll take my health region, and I'm not saying anything because my CEO of my health region has very little ability to act locally or regionally, even though they're a regional health region, because their priorities come from the province, which is the capital, and then they have to deliver those. #1 priority, health priority in my region is hip and knee replacement. Very important, senior population, but remember, the bulk of the population is between 15 and 24. Huge addictions issues that are right here. Huge mental health issues that are right here. So when we talk about balance, it's not only balance in policing. I have a real problem in policing because the discussion, when we get to the debate with government, it's always hard versus soft. Hard, arrest and incarcerate; soft, intervention and prevention. And that's got to stop. We as a CACP support the omnibus bill because it makes sense. It's serious crime and it puts people in jail. Those people should be going to jail anyway, most of them. Doesn't mean we forget about them, we still rehabilitate them. But to not do this on this side is equally as important. So why are we not having a discussion about smart on crime? Why are we not having a discussion about smart on community safety? So when the omnibus bill is passed, we cover that off. Let's focus on the stuff that shouldn't be in the system. In my police service, 27% of our calls are criminal in nature. 27%. 5% of those calls go to criminal charge, which leads 73% of all of our calls for something else that we need to title it. Let's title it antisocial behavior. Because we know if we let the behavior carry out, it will become a criminal offense because we can predict that through our agencies at health, social service, education. So 3/4 almost of our calls don't start off criminal in nature. They're responding to domestic violence, mental health, social issues. Some of it becomes criminal, but we generally know, somebody knows long before it becomes criminal that it's happening. But we tend to wait till it's in the system, and then we tell them what they need to do to fix themselves. So could we rethink that? And that's what we'll talk about here. So in Scotland, what they did is they crafted a concordat. It's actually concordat's about that thick a document. And where government, I think, is smart, they used David's story. They basically crafted a piece of legislation and or kind of a document that got them going that provided seed money to make regional and local authorities act at a regional and local level. And to get that, they had to have common goals to meet what they were going to drive for. So they used the money back to an investment versus an